Ladies and gentlemen, Moira is officially screwed. Blizzard have no idea what they're doing with her. She's been screwed for a long time now, and she has gone from being one of the worst supports in Overwatch 2 to being one of the worst supports in Overwatch 2. And I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but let me get into it, okay? There's several factors over the period of many, many seasons that have made Moira go from this to this. Yeah, it really sucks because there's no way for Moira to get value being passive that is greater than that of Juno or Anna or basically any support. So if I do this, we cannot get more value. Like in lower ranks, yeah, maybe you can because players miss shots, but then they made all the hitboxes bigger. So now we can't take those hits. We've got 24 health left. So then we have to try and put damage out. We can't put damage out because we've got no health to actually survive anything. So what happened? What happened to Moira? What did Blizzard do that was all so bad that the Moira mains are angry? Okay, let's start off with number one. And you'll already know this, right? You'll already know where I'm going with this. The DPS passive. However, the DPS passive affected everybody. But that's not... It affected Moira disproportionately because all of her kit is damage and healing. She has no utility. So the areas of her kit that got nerfed by the DPS passive are going to be her grasp healing, her grasp lifesteal, her biotic orb, and her coalescence. They've all been nerfed by it. There's reasons why this is disproportionate to other heroes. I mean, things like Anna's sleep has not been nerfed by the DPS passive. If anything, it's probably been buffed because it's very difficult now to heal the players that have been slept on the ground. But that's it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? Let's focus on Moira. Moira has to spend a lot of time in the what I call the ability danger zone. This is where all the shots come in, the fire strikes, the random Junkrat nades, the Pharaoh rockets. They're all firing in around that cluster of players. And Moira doesn't get the option to stay far away from that, to stay behind cover. She's in and amongst it, right? And for this reason, she needs a lot of sustain and an escape ability. And she's got, obviously her Fade can get her out of danger, but when she uses Fade, she's now inactive until she gets back to her team and can start healing them again. Her sustain is what's really kept her alive in this. If she takes the odd random shot, she gets to right click, she gets to use her orb, she gets to utilize the support passive, or even use coalescence. She can take those shots, or at least she used to be able to. But the problem with Moira is that she needs to stay in line of sight of enemies and teammates all the time. If you go around a corner, for example, you can no longer attack any enemies. If you want to do anything meaningful, like get your resources back or do any meaningful damage, you're going to have to step around that corner, stay in line of sight while you're right clicking them, and that will get you your sustain, but it also means the DPS passive is going to be applied on you a lot more. That's a big problem. Moira's taken a lot more damage from a lot more heroes. She doesn't get the option like an Anna, who can hide around a corner, step out, peek shoot, step back, out of line of sight, and then do it again with her slower rate of fire. So this will all come together shortly, right? You'll see why all of these factors have contributed to Moira being absolute trash tier right now. But let's focus on the next area, okay? The projectile hitbox changes. This, for the same reason that Moira needs to spend more time in that ability danger zone and in line of sight of players, meant that when they made these hitbox changes, so they made it so that the bullet sizes were basically bigger for all, loads of heroes, including Moira, I might add. Moira got more accurate. The problem with this is that Moira doesn't need to be more accurate. I mean, if you go on any forums, everybody's saying, hey, you don't need to aim with Moira. It's got some, lock on, the kind of stuff they talk about. She doesn't need the accuracy buff. She was always hitting most of the time anyway. So pretty much every hero got this accuracy buff, and Moira basically got nothing from it. And then with her having to stay in line of sight and in really close to the main core of the players, she gets hit by a lot more stuff now. Again, with heroes like Anna, it's just a good example because of the range, right? Because she's not in line of sight that often, If she does get hit, she can hide around the corner quickly. It's a good opportunity to reload her weapon. And she's at a range that in general is pretty safe. Moira doesn't get that luxury, of course. So that's another area that has impacted Moira. So mostly to do with her sustain, because she's getting hit more, taking more damage. She's not going to be able to dodge the shots as much. Therefore, her health is going to deplete a lot quicker. The beam weapons versus armor changes. Now, I could be slightly wrong on this. I'm going to admit I'm a bit rusty with my memory with this part. My understanding is that a while ago, they changed how beam weapons work against armor. And rightly so. At the time, you had Zarya, you had Echo, you had Symmetra absolutely decimating tanks. They were just crushing them. And so Blizzard said, hey, well, how can we alleviate this problem a bit? And so they changed it so that beam weapons did less damage against armor. For some reason, they included Moira in this nerf. Moira's, very, very weak right click that did very little against tanks anyway. They added Moira to it. So now Moira went from doing nearly no damage to tanks to doing no damage to tanks. It's horrific. Like, just go to the practice range and select like an Orisa or something and start right clicking her and see how long it would take you to kill them with your right click. Now, and then go pick someone like Baptiste or, anyone, Lucio or someone, and just start attacking them and just time it. The difference is insane. An unnecessary change. They just wanted to say all beam weapons we're going to nerf this way without individually thinking maybe this would impact Moira in kind of a bad way. Anyway, that's another change which has kind of screwed over Moira. Let's go to the next one. Speaking of the tanks Giga buff that we had quite recently. Blizzard again did something quite cool. Tanks were having a real survivability problem. You can listen to any content creator who plays tank. There's clips around of like a Reinhardt getting annihilated in 0.1 seconds. Tank survivability was a problem. So then they buffed the tanks a lot. They went with outrageous buffs. And I actually liked that, because it meant that Blizzard were not afraid to take some risks. It meant that they wanted to just try a drastic solution, and it didn't really work. The tanks were way too strong, and then they dialed in those changes a little bit. Now, in my opinion, they haven't quite balanced that right. I'm not going to get into that too much, but the tanks are still a bit of a problem. Some tanks more than others, D.Va being one of them that's still... They need to sort that out. But this kind of put Moira in a difficult situation again because of her range limitations. So Moira has to play around the tanks. And now you get a tank like D.Va, who's had her damage and health buffed, who can now simply fly through your tank, kill a squishy, and then fly out again. And who's the squishies playing around nearby the tank? Moira. So even if your fade is forced, because they could always do that, by the way, they could always do it, but the problem is that they 100% committed to it when they did it before. Now they're not all in, because they have time to go in, force your fade, carry on chasing you, kill you, and then still get out, which is kind of insane, especially at the high ranks. Which means that as a Moira, you have to play incredibly passive. You have to be very, very scared. And a scared Moira is going to get very little value compared to a whole number of other sports. You don't have the utility. You can't just sit back, heal your team, and then when they're in danger, throw out some utility and carry on doing that, and occasionally pot shot a bit of damage, right? Moira can't do that. Moira needs to be constantly active. If you're just sitting there healing, one, you're going to run out of resources. Two, you're not going to be really doing any damage at all or contributing anything other than healing to your team. And that's just, it doesn't work, because so many other sports can do that. It doesn't work with Moira. There is, of course, another part. With all of the tanks being buffed health-wise, so they've all got more health, Moira's orb has a capacity. Now, some people might not know this, but a healing orb can heal for 300 health maximum before it just, poof, it's gone. A damage orb can deal 200 damage before it's gone. Now, they buffed all of the tanks. Her orb now can heal for less of the tank's max percentage health. If a tank, well, if a hero had 300 health, you could fire an orb and it would get them from 0 to 100%. If you suddenly made it so that that tank had 400 health, it can now only heal 75% of that tank's health. She's like the only hero in the game that really gets that, just from the capacity. It's not from the healing rate or anything like that. The capacity of the orb is now limited. Which brings me on to my next point. The global health buffs. So the global health buffs were designed to reduce the effectiveness of burst damage in the game. And burst damage has always been king over sustained damage. Well, for the longest time it has. And this was a good move from Blizzard, like increasing the health for all the players. But again, they didn't increase the capacity of the orb. So where Moira orb could very rarely, I think I've only done it once in the whole 7,000 hours that I played with Moira, where her orb could kill a player from 100% of her health to 0. It can't anymore for 99% of the heroes. A 250 health hero, it can't kill them. Even if they stood in a room, stood on it while it bounced up and down. Can't do it anymore. Now the problem is, with everybody's health changing, she's going to run out of resources before she gets a player up to their 100% health. Yeah, she was never burst damage, and yet she got really nerfed by these changes, and it's pretty bad for her. Her grasp is slow. They increased the damage of it, which is nice, and they needed to because it's not burst. But they didn't increase the damage of her coalescence or her damage orb to compensate. And I think recently they have increased it, but one of the things that they changed before they increased that was they gave coalescence 5 extra healing. Blizzard thought that self-healing during her ultimate was the reason why Moira was struggling, which is absurd because let's say you get 3 coalescences a game. First of all, you've got to take damage for that buff to even take effect. And then she got healing anyway, so for that to actually be a meaningful difference it's so rare that it's just pointless making the buff. That brings us on to the next one. And for me, it's the nail in the coffin. Blizzard nerfed Moira's health. Along with a number of other heroes, the mobility health nerf. This one's a big problem, a very big problem. Considering all of the previous changes that Blizzard made, this one is a huge problem for Moira. As I mentioned earlier, Moira has to be in the ability danger zone. She's going to take damage. She's going to take a lot of damage. She needs sustain to do that. By not giving her the health pool for the sustain to take effect, the sustain's basically useless. So what would normally happen with a Moira is we'd be able to step out, get some resources, we'd be shot at, we'd take a few shots, we would dodge some shots. Then when we get low, we can say fade backwards, we can heal ourselves up with our heal orb, right click a few more targets, we've got resources, we're back in the game to heal again. What's happened now is we can't take the shot, which means we can't stay out there to sustain that damage that we've lost. And yeah, you literally can't do anything. You have to play like a coward. You have to sit back behind your team and heal. And as mentioned earlier, that just doesn't work for Moira. She hasn't got utility. She cannot do that. You have to play a super active playstyle with Moira. If you've got downtime, you're just no good. Being unable to take damage because she hasn't got the health, and being able to unable to dodge shots because they buffed the hitboxes, and then being unable to play anywhere around the enemy tank because of the tank giga buffs. And then the DPS passive, again, hindering the amount of sustain that she can actually receive. What can a Moira do? How can a Moira get value compared to other supports who have utility, who can heal in safety or in range? Like, there's so many things that other supports can do, while Moira is just severely limited now. And that's where we're at with Moira. Yes, Moira is an easy hero to obtain her skill floor. We're not saying that Moira is a difficult hero. Nobody says that Moira is a difficult hero, mechanically. The thing about Moira is that she is quite difficult to obtain more than her skill floor value compared to other supports. For example, an Ana can throw a single nade. Now, nade can be quite difficult, right? It can be a bit difficult to aim, but if you get a little bit lucky and fire a nade that hits a couple of players on your team and a few on the enemy team, you've literally just won the fight with one button. Like, there's so little that the enemy team can do against it. That doesn't require that much skill. It requires some skill to place the nade, to choose the timing when to use the nade, right? It doesn't require that much skill. It's not that difficult. Obviously, aiming with a number of supports is significantly more difficult than with Moira. That's no Moira main is ever denying that. But our damage is lower. Virtually every support in the game can kill a Moira faster than the Moira can kill them. The only thing that allows you to even have a chance in those duels is your sustain and the ability to dodge shots. And with everything being more accurate now, and with you having less health to actually sustain into, that's kind of gone as well. So these are not the only things, by the way. Like, these are the main ones, but there's so many small ones as well. They made changes to Graviton Flux, Graviton Surge, designed to catch Reaper to stop the Reaper escaping. And they added that effect to Moira as well. There's also the map changes that they've recently made, making it much easier for heroes, non-mobile heroes, to get to the high ground. Well, that was one of their weaknesses. Like, a skilled Moira could fade jump up there to a number of these high grounds, but apparently they want to remove that advantage that she has over other supports as well. So yeah, Moira's pretty much dead at the moment. I know this is just a massive rant from a Moira main. Oh, yeah, we got it right. But I haven't felt that Moira has been this bad ever. And I mean, the win rates on Overbuff speak for themselves. We had Brig in Grandmaster at something like a 54% win rate, with Moira sitting at 47. So that simply means that if you play 100 games on average with Brig, you're going to win 8 more than you lose. 8 games can be 2 tiers, right? You could jump up from Masters 3 to Masters 1 with 8 games. With Moira, you play 100 games on average. This is the average win rate across everybody. You're going to lose 6 more games than you win. So roughly every 100 games, you're losing a tier and a half. So you just drop. So the more you play, the worse your rank's going to get. And there are other heroes in that category. Moira is not alone. I'm not trying to say, oh, Moira is the worst support. She's one of them. She's one of them right now. Anything outside of the very lowest ranks, she needs changes. And I think the worst part of it, do you know what the worst part is? Blizzard in their patch notes said, Moira has not really been affected by the health change. I swear they don't play the hero. They just don't play the hero.